Have you ever played a game that is just so good that you gotta share it with somebody? Well, for me, that game is Verho Curse of Faces. Because Verho Curse of Faces do be the type of game where you find a giant demonic plant, hitting it with a two-handed great sword. It do be the type of game where you're exploring a forgotten long lost kingdom, and it do be the type of game that will pull you into its world and completely immerse you within it. And I fucking love it. And I hope that you will too. So let's get right into it. So what is Verho Curse of Faces? Well, Verho Curse of Faces is a Kingsfield-like, which is to say it's a first-person dungeon crawler with free movement, meaning that there's no grid that you're moving on like in something like Legends of Grimrock. However, in Verho, you can move wherever you want, like, well, Kingsfield. And it is also a game that heavily relies on exploration and sort of just finding out the path by yourself. It's a game that doesn't handhold you whatsoever. Now, do not get it twisted, it doesn't mean Verho is some ultra punishing game only made for the most gamer of gamers among us. It is not really that at all. It is very much like the old Kingsfield game. A game that will take some time to get used to, but once you have, it isn't that bad to play in terms of being quote-unquote hard. Because you see, very much like Kingsfield and Kingsfield likes in general, a lot of the combat can be avoided either one of two ways. Either you circle strafe the enemy, just walk in a circle around them as you punch them, or you walk away from them and then walk back to punch them. These two simple strats can get you through 99% of the encounters. This is what the big demon overlords doesn't want you to know. Now, all of that being said, it doesn't mean Verho doesn't try to do something unique with its combat system. Where you see a lot of times with these games, you can't really just get through most things by just circle strafing them. In Verho, they try to implement some jumping and some more combat-oriented mechanics, and I find them to be generally really well implemented where they are implemented. And it's a strategy I like a lot. This opens up a lot of freedom in combat, where sometimes to avoid an enemy's attack, you will want to jump instead of just move away. And this also allows you to be a lot more aggressive a lot more often. And I think that is in general, really cool mechanic and a cool little combat detail. However, Verho also has another really important mechanic you need to pay attention to. Normally in a lot of these games, you can spam attacks. You can charge the attack, but it might not be necessary. In Verho, you don't do anything if you don't charge your attack. You might as well not attack at all if it isn't with a charged attack. Therefore, you need to always charge your attacks when you're playing melee. However, Verho also has an entire range kit with bow and arrows and all of that jazz, and it has magic to boot. And Verho, unlike other games, really do feel like I need to heavily invest into one path, meaning that I can't be a good jack of all trades necessarily without at least grinding quite a bit. What I've noticed within my brief Verho playthroughs is that I needed to specifically go for a playstyle, and while the game gave me the resources to reset my character, it wasn't like I could just immediately swap around. I would need to put some thought into my stats, and it's one of those things that I appreciate, as Verho uses the same stat systems that something like Dark Souls or Elden Ring would, where you have your strength, dexterity, intelligence, and so on, and each of them will be corresponding to a weapon type. You know, your dexterity is your faster focused weapons, strength is the slower ones. I played strength basically at all times because it's just what I enjoy. And then there's magic, which is focused around, funnily enough, magic, where you charge your different spells and you get a bunch of different spells to fuck around with, and they can do a bunch of different things. It is very much that sort of game, and it works really well for what it is worth. And one thing I really appreciate is Verho's attempt at making these stats worth investing into. Not just through weapon scaling like the classical Souls games do, but also through items that have absurdly high requirements, such as spells that have over 150 intelligence requirement before you can get to play with them. I love these systems because it means that there is a reason for me to invest heavily into these stats and make my character a mono character, something which I genuinely tend to do. I love these systems, and I love how it plays into the general building of a character within Verho. I think it is pretty cool. And I think it also makes it so every playthrough can feel pretty unique, because maybe you don't play with bows on one playthrough, so you can switch over to them for the next one, and so on. I really love these systems, and that brings me to another entire talk, because what are weapons without big enemies to use them on? You see, Verho has quite a few big old bosses for you to fight, and each boss has their own moveset and timings that you'll need to learn to avoid taking damage. And while you can mostly face tank a lot of them if you have enough health pots, backstabbing and just walking around them isn't always the ideal solution, which means that in my opinion Verho's boss fights have passed my test of approval. I officially need to do some jumping, I need to do some crouching, and I need to do some avoiding damage. It is a genuinely really fun thing to do, because these fights are all unique, they all have their own story reasons, and in my opinion the more they're built up to, the better they usually are. There are a few misses here. Very few. There's one of the big demons that you have to fight later on in the game. They can be a little bit clunky, mainly because they have this entire platforming section mostly that revolves around you walking up its legs and then punching its weak spots. That is a little bit weak because it's a gimmick fight more so than an actual boss fight. But other than that, I don't think there is a single downturn in the boss's quality. All of them feel pretty good. But what does any of this mean if there isn't a good story to follow? Well, luckily for us, in Verho there is quite a good story to follow. And while you're given a bit of it by the beginning of the game, there's a lot more for you to uncover as you play through Verho Curse of Faces. And I will be talking in detail about some of those reveals, while there's still gonna be story that you can find within the game, such as the individual character's motive for coming along and what is actually sort of going on with each individual person. This will be the overall plot of what happened pre you entering Yarif. So if that is something you don't want to hear, then I will have a skip button in the description of this video so you can jump over this part, or you just follow the time code on the screen now. So what happened with the Curse of Faces and how did humanity survive? Well, it all happened 600 years ago when a mad king killed the archmage of his kingdom's family, Verho. Verho, after seeing his family being killed, went insane and summoned a demon that caused this curse to happen upon the world. Verho would then regret his actions. You will find these notes in the Keeper's workshop. They'll mention how he attempted to figure out a solution to the curse, some way that humanity to persist. However, 46 years later, he would realize, after having failed numerous times to try to solve this curse, that there wouldn't be any human left that could reproduce anyway. So it was too late. However, throughout his experiments, he has learned how to, create another body. So he started to recreate humans and repopulate the earth with made humans, giving them masks so they couldn't see each other. And that is essentially how the world comes into being as it is when you start playing Verho. And all of that is wrapped up within an incredibly well written game too. Because Verho really doesn't pull away from any punches. It's a game that, quite frankly, grabs me by my ballsack. I love how Verho is written. Every character is so mysterious and they all have their own agenda and goals. And when they finally reveal them to you, you can tell the genuine emotion within their voice actors too. It is so well done. From the voice actors just doing this amazing job to the general writing being so cohesive and good. I really enjoy every aspect of the storytelling within Verho. And that is not to mention the environmental storytelling that you will no doubt come across as well when you are playing Verho. A good example is when you enter the temples early in the game, you can sort of see the path that the heretics that had disobeyed the order of Yarif had to take, and you could sort of tell how dangerous and how much that would have hurt. You don't need somebody to explain it to you, because you get to see it, and the game doesn't really need to communicate to you what this was about, and the fact that this was probably much less of a prison sentence and much more of a death sentence. And all of that is wrapped up within a low poly art style that is very reminiscent of the old Kingsfield. And in my opinion, that low poly art style is utilized to its absolute limit with Verho, because Verho has a strong art direction, and Verho takes that art direction and it just makes it insane. It takes it so many places, and I really appreciate that, as the visuals of the game never gets old. From exploring the swamps at the beginning of the game to going out and fighting what I can only describe as being a weird dinosaur, to going into meat mountains and later exploring a ruined castle and demon dimensions. Verho's art style goes so wild and goes so many places, and all the meanwhile it manages to be cohesive, that in my opinion it is pretty impressive that it has this strong of an art direction. I really love the way this game looks, which is a lot of praise, because when I originally saw the game, I wasn't a big fan of it, but it really grew on me, and I think that is due to the very strong art direction and the cohesion within that. The fact that it never shies away or breaks away from its style, and not just does it lean into it, but it also does a lot of unique things with it, such as the different demon realms, and how the entire area you can be in can sort of rob around, and like you can go from being in a graveyard to being at an underground castle. I love this sort of shit. It's really deeply me. I love it. I genuinely do. Verho also has a fantastic soundtrack, and in my opinion, the soundtrack and the audio design in general can become a fundament in how immersive your game is. And I think my theory is proven correct with Verho, as in my opinion, the areas where Verho really shines is where the audio design also really genuinely shines through. Areas such as the cathedral early on in the game, but also just the nameless village, they are so immersive. Like, you really do feel safe in the Nameless Village. It is like the Resident Evil safe room. It's a fantastic little melody that is being played when you're there, and I believe it comes together with every other aspect of the game, and it really hunkers it down, it pulls it together, and I believe this creates for quite a good experience when you're playing Verho. In my opinion, another really nice thing is that Verho is still being updated. As we're speaking, the developer is still adding more stuff to Verho. Currently they are working on New Game Plus and a randomizer, and I think there was talks that it was gonna launch in January of next year, so 2026. And I am really looking forward to that. I think it's great to see that there's genuine passion here. And I think that is really fucking cool, because Verho is a really cool game, and it's a game that's well worth experiencing. And I mentioned that I have 3 playthroughs. That is because there are 4 endings. One ending you get as you play the game, and then you get to go back and get the other ending on that playthrough, and then there's 2 other endings that you gotta play the game to get. And in my opinion, each of the endings are really good. They even have those RPG-ass slides where this is what happened after the end of the game, and I really enjoy that. I think it was a really big joy to get to experience Verho the way that I did, and I think 100% in Verho multiple times is a fun little thing to do, in the sense that Verho isn't a long game. Across all of my playthroughs, I don't have more than 40 hours in Verho. And I think that in and of itself isn't a bad thing at all, because I believe that the quality of Verho really does make up for the time it takes to beat. These are some of the best 12-hour playthroughs I have had, period. Verho is fantastic. It's well worth experiencing, even if you aren't a big Kingsfield fan. I would recommend at least giving it a look, and then debating if you want to give it a try, because there is a free demo, and I think it is a good game that deserves more attention than what it's got. And with all of that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you can do the YouTube stuff, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Please do go and check out Verho, links are in the description. Bye.